Welcome to Northwoods, everybody. That is a long pause, Josh. You're right. Pastor Brad's not here tonight, so I'm filling in case you were wondering. No, this isn't what Brad looks like when he shaves. He's just not here. So I'm going to be filling in for Pastor Brad tonight. So welcome and welcome everybody here. And just to, remind that we do have people here. I'm going to ask everybody here, how you doing tonight? Great. See, you could be great too. I mean, we're open. Just saying. So one thing I do have to do though, just for Pastor Brad, because they put this monitor in the back here so that you could see yourself, so I can see me, which is a little unsettling, I gotta say. But Brad said, hey, now that we have that monitor back there, you won't stand off the screen anymore when you're preaching. So I'm just standing off the screen right now, and I can envision him in convulsions right now. So I'm just enjoying it a little bit. Hi, Brad. Yeah. But anyway. I preached, I don't know, it's been a while ago now. You probably erased it from your memory, but a while back about power. And we talked about it. Pastor Brad's word for the year is powerhouse. And he reminds of this every week. A person, group, team, or the like, having great energy, strength, or potential for success. And he's got another definition along with that he uses. But he reminds us of that every week, that's the word that the Lord gave him for us for this year. That's who we are to be as a body. And last time we talked a little bit about, if we are as a body are going to be powerhouses, that we need to have a group of powerhouses. Individually, we need to be powerhouses, for that to work corporately. So that's one of the things that we talked about. And just, to move beyond powerhouse, we talked about power. And I had 4 points that we were going to talk about. There. That's the one I was looking for. Who set this up? They got them all out of order. I'll have to fire me. Power. What we talked about last week was first the appearance of spiritual power and the nature of spiritual power. And if you remember, I put godly power instead of spiritual power last time because I felt like spiritual power was going to kind of give away the ending. But I went back to spiritual power this time because I think it's a better description. So we talked about those a little bit last time about the appearance of power. Like we look at power in this world and who we think has power and the way they exercise that power, and that's not really, that understanding of power is not the same as the understanding of power you get if you watch Christ walk and things like that. There's some differences there, and the way we watch the world exercise power isn't the way that in the church or in the body that we should necessarily exercise that power. It looks different. It's of a different nature. So we're going to go back a slide now since I have them out of order. And this is another definition. She's curious, like English class. I know, but power as defined, and we had this last time, the ability to do something or act in a particular way, especially as a faculty or quality, the capacity or ability to direct or influence the behavior of others or the course of events, and physical strength and force exerted by something or someone. Spiritually, when we exercise these things, it's different. In the world, we see this a lot, is that physical strength, force. I have power. I'm gonna move into your country with all my tanks, and just like playing Risk, I'm just gonna push you off the board and do it because I can do it. That's power. that power too is limited. And people that exercise it often tend to over-exercise it and lose power because they thought they had more than they did. But that's a digression. But and we'll pick at this a little bit as we go. But I wanted to get that out there, so now we'll jump 2 slides ahead. Power. If you remember last time, we talked a little bit, just briefly, about Samson, and I promise you we talk more about Samson later. So it's later. So we're gonna talk a little bit more about Samson tonight. There's so many people when you talk about spiritual power in the Bible that you could look at, that you could refer to, that are great examples of it. They're probably better examples of it than Samson, but there are specific things in that account of Samson that really struck me, that really, I could just hear God speaking to me through those, and God willing, I can share some of that. So we'll see how that goes. First, we had this up here last time too. We read it, and it says, "Then Samson, a champion from Gath, came out of the ranks. He was over 9 feet tall. He wore a bronze helmet, and his bronze coat of mail weighed 125 pounds. He also wore bronze leg armor, and he carried a bronze javelin on his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was as heavy as a weaver's beam, tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. His armor bearer walked ahead of him and carrying a shield." So you can see where his power came from, right? No, that's not Samson. As you see down here, that's from the New Gary version. It's different. Don't quote that. That's the description we have of Goliath in the Bible. Obvious where Goliath's power came from. Dude was a giant. I mean, obviously he was strong. They kind of go hand in hand. Samson's different. Samson's power didn't come from, hey, there's Samson, look the size of him. In fact, they weren't exactly sure where Samson's power came from. And that's what we want to talk about first, is the source of that spiritual power. So Samson covers like 4 chapters in the book of Judges, and where I could read all 4 to you, but you'd fall asleep and you probably wouldn't learn anything, and I'd need water. And I picked select verses, not just to take the things that I liked, but I'll read a verse and I'll explain it and just kind of move through that narrative a little more quickly. But I recommend you definitely read it, because there's other stuff in there, definitely. So always read it. But I always try not to just cherry pick verses. But here we'll never get through it otherwise. So I did. So here we go. We'll start in the very beginning, before Samson's born. This is something that the angel of the Lord said to his mother: "You will become pregnant and have a son, whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines." Nazir means set apart, sanctified. That's what the whole thing about being a Nazirite was. I said, I take a vow that sets me apart. I'm going to do something specific for God. So that was that whole relationship of being a Nazirite. And this was, promised to his mother. She had been barren up to this point, and she got this promise that she would have a son. And then she has the son and names him Samson, because if you named him something else, it would be a different story. Moving on into the next chapter. Samson's born now, and obviously he's grown up a little bit here, and he's Samson the man. And we get to see a little bit of Samson's character already in this verse. The verse says, 1, Samson went down to Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, "I've seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife." Direct kind of guy there. Samson's the judge. Samson's going to be the leader of Israel. And one of his first things to do as an adult is say, I'm going to marry me a Philistine, because it pleases me. God, I know you did all these things for me. You blessed me. But, I haven't had a drink, and I haven't cut my hair. But she's pretty, so I'm just going to go marry a Philistine. And so he does. And then they go into his wedding feast, and it was like a 7-day wedding feast. And he told the guys at the wedding feast, he's like, I got a riddle for you. And if you can solve this riddle, I'll give you 30 linen garments and 30 new changes of clothes. And he tells them that it's not even really a riddle. It's based on something that his own experience, so only he would know the answer. Really wasn't kind of fair, but So then the days are going by, and his wife, the Philistine guys tell his wife, hey, find out the answer from Samson because we can't afford to lose his bet. So she nags him, and he says no, and he says no. Finally, he says, oh, fine. This is what the riddle's about. So then when that day comes, they come and they tell him the answer. And he gets all mad because, well, I told my wife in confidence, and she told them. And so he went out and he killed 30 Philistines and took their clothes and gave those clothes to the guys that he had bet. So here's your clothes. So that's, Samson was, he's an interesting study. So that kind of leads you through most of a chapter right there. That's what happens. Samson does that, and then he gets mad and he kills all the guys. He gives them that stuff and he goes home. So I'm done with you guys. I'm out of here. And moving into the next chapter, one day Samson went to Gaza. Oh, I guess before that, there was another incident with Samson, and he went to see his wife, and her dad said, well, I gave her to another guy because you left, so now she's married to him. And he got all mad, and he went and killed a bunch more Philistines because that was kind of his thing. And the Philistines actually went and killed his wife and her father because they didn't want trouble with Samson. They burned him. So apparently they were nice people too. So that leads up to this. Now, Samson's not married because his wife is gone. One day, Samson went to Gaza where he saw a prostitute. He went in to spend the night with her. People of Gaza were told, Samson's here, so they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the city gate, and they made no move during the night, saying, at dawn we will kill him. But Samson lay there only until the middle of the night. Then he got up and took hold of the doors of the city gate together with the two posts and tore them loose, bar and all. He lifted them to his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. So another highlight of Samson's days here. He's making another good choice. He's doing what Samson does. It's like, hey, there's a prostitute there. I got some money in my pocket. Why not? And it leads to more trouble with the Philistines. And then just moving on to the next verse from there. Sometime later, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek whose name was Delilah. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, see if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength and how we can overpower him, so we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver. Yeah, that's a pile. So, Samson in his great judgment, she comes to him and she says, hey, tell me what's the secret of your strength. And so he makes up a story. It's if you bind me with 7 ropes that had never been tied before, then I'll be as weak as any man. And so she does. And she calls the Philistines in on him, and he breaks free and he runs him off. And she says, okay, you lied to me, Samson. Tell me the truth. Like 3 times. And 3 times he tells her a different story, and she keeps telling him. And every time, miraculously, the Philistines show up on him while he's sleeping after she does whatever he said. Maybe his mind wasn't as strong as his arms. I don't know. But eventually, she says, if you love me, Samson, you'd tell me the secret of your power. And she rolls her eyes and, Samson, remember back, rewind, his wife, he told her the secret that he had, and she shared it. After all the stuff with Delilah, what does he do? Well, he tells her his secret, of course, because that just makes sense. So he tells her the real secret. He said, well, I've never had my hair cut since I was a child because I'm a Nazarite. The razor's never touched my head. So she gets him to sleep and calls somebody in, and they shave his head, and then they haul him away prisoner. And being the nice guys that they are, they gouge out his eyes, and then they throw him in prison and put him to labor, put him to work. I guess it's easy to sit here and look at him and say, Samson, how dense can you be? I mean, how many times are you going to fall for the same thing? Obviously, there's a certain area here, Samson, it's a problem for you, and obviously you fall into the same trap over and over again. And I mean, it's easy to look at that from here and see it and say it. But it might be easy for somebody else to stand there and look at this and say the same thing that I don't see. It might be obvious to other people, but it's not to me. So maybe don't judge Samson quite as harshly because he may not be as different from us as we'd like to think. So Samson's doing his thing, grinding grain in prison, blind now, and the Philistines decide to throw a big party. It's like, hey, we got Samson. We don't have to worry about him anymore. We can go back to doing our, oppress Israel thing. Times are good. Let's have a party. So they throw this big party, and they said, hey, bring Samson out so we can watch him, so he can perform for us and entertain us. This guy who killed all these Philistines, we can just make him suffer some more. So they bring Samson out, and they're all mocking him, making fun of him, stuff. And Samson, then Samson prayed to the Lord, Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. So what happens next is Samson tricks the servant into bringing him to the pillars, and there were 2 main pillars in this place where they were assembled, and he gets a hand on each, and he pushes them over, and he dies with all those Philistines, all the leaders of the Philistines and everybody else. It all comes down on their head, and they all die. Happy story. I just can't see how else Samson's story would end, given the way it went. But he ultimately kind of repented of what he had done. So the question then is, what was the source of spiritual power there? Well, it was my hair. I didn't have a razor touch my head since birth. So, obviously, I don't know why when I was in the service they made you cut your hair really short, and it doesn't make sense because strength comes from hair. I mean, Army people ought to be tripping on it. It's just logical, right? They all wanted to know the secret, and Samson, I don't even really think understood the truth of where his power came from. But if you read the story, if you actually go through it, I'm going to read you a couple other verses here. It's there. It tells you where his strength came from. Going back, you will be pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines. A Nazirite dedicated to God. And then when the woman gave birth to a baby boy and named him Samson, he grew and the Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him while he was in Mahanadan between Zorah and Eshtaol. The Spirit of the Lord began to stir him. And we've discussed this before in the Old Testament, especially in the New Testament too, but repetition is meant for emphasis. Like when Jesus says, truly, truly, I say unto you, it's not because he was not in the habit of telling the truth. He's telling because, hey, I want you to listen to what I'm about to say, because it's going to blow your mind, and you're probably not going to believe it until you think about it. So truly, truly, I say to you, and in this short passage about Samson, this phrase, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, 3 times in those 2 chapters. Where does Samson's power come from? Before he killed 1,000 Philistines, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. Before he rose up another time and killed a bunch of Philistines, it says the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. He was walking down the path and a lion jumped out. And before he ripped it apart with his bare hands, it says the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. It should have been clear to Samson where his power came from. But I don't think he looked beyond himself enough to really think about it. But it's obvious to us where his power came from. It was from the Spirit of the Lord. It was from being close to God with that vow that he had made. It was toward the end of his story when he repented and called out to God that his power came back. It wasn't because his hair grew back. It was because he looked back at the source of his power and said, I've given it up. I want it back. God, Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more. Your degree of spiritual power can be measured by your nearness to God. Not by the length of your hair, not by how many Bible verses you can quote, not by how many people you witness to, how shiny your seat is in the church, how well you sing, how often you sing, none of that stuff. What Bible version you read. We all argue about this version's better and that version's better, and I think if we just spent some time reading a version, we'd be better off. If you want to have spiritual power, this is your source. Your nearness to God will determine how much spiritual power you have. That's simple. That's the way it is. And if you don't think so, draw closer to God. If you're out there seeking spiritual power, you're going to have a hard time. If you're out there seeking God, you'll find spiritual power. You'll find God will strengthen you. The power will be there. Now we have spiritual power. Next is, what's the purpose of it? What's the purpose of spiritual power? We know what Samson did with his spiritual power. I mean, it does say in there in a couple spots that he judged Israel for 20 years, so he must have done some other stuff. But that's not the highlights of his career that we get. It's Samson, the thick-muscled and thick-headed, that we get. Because he was more focused on me, on this, on what I can do, on what I want. I mean, I saw a pretty girl, go get her for me. That's the way a lot of us are living life, is like, that's what I want. So I'm going to get that, and we'll figure it out, When God empowers you, he doesn't empower you to get what you want. It would be nice if he did, The world we live in is, that's, if you want it, get it. If it feels good, do it. That's what life's all about. Life's too short to not eat dessert, blah, 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 That's not what we're here for, and that's not what God empowers us for. And if you'll notice one thing about Samson, even when he came back to God and he repented, it's like, Gary, you've read us this verse 3 times. I know. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for the Israelites. For all they've done to you, God, to your name in front of other people. God, just let me have revenge for my eyes. That's where Samson's level is. Hey, they took my eyes, I want to take them. God, give me power to take them. And God grants it to him because it suits God's purpose, but this is what God's power is meant for. Hey, so I can wipe them out, take them with me. One last great hurrah. That's not what spiritual power is for. It's not to please you. That's not what it's for. We talked about it in Bible study this week. Jesus, the only man-made thing in heaven are the scars in Jesus' hands and feet. And in the same fashion, the only thing that we do in this world that's eternal is the mark we make on other people. Everything else is going to be gone. But the influence you have, what you do for other people or what you do to them, that's going to have a permanent impact. That'll tell, ultimately. We are spiritually empowered to change people for good, to build people up, to strengthen people. If we go back to our definition of power, I took the liberty of doing some highlighting, the ability to do something or act in a particular way, the capacity or ability to direct or influence, physical strength and force exerted. Power is action. These are action words. Power means something gets done. That's what power is for. It's not so, I can pray these really awesome prayers and I can speak in tongues and nobody will know. It's like this is, where did that all come from? It's a wealth of, I don't understand, and I can prophesy. I can just pray day after day and be built up and have all this power like the Hoover Dam of spirituality. I just be powerful. Power does. Spiritual power does. That's what it's for. It's not for storing up and not sharing. It's for accomplishing something. God has things for us to do. That's why we're here. If you're still here, He still got something for you to do. That doesn't mean don't do it so you can be here longer. God's got things for us to do, and that's why He empowers us, is so that we can do things. When 2 Timothy, hey, if you want, you can come on Wednesday night. We'll be talking about this. As Paul says to Timothy, for God did not give us a spirit of timidity, but a spirit of power and of love and of self-discipline. That word there, power, is a Greek word, dunamis. It's where we get our word dynamo, dynamite, dynamic. It's not power because I'm really strong. It's not power because I'm really spiritual and you just come here and you can. It's power to do something. And Paul, all through these letters to Timothy, is telling him how to do something. That's what it's for. Do something. And just a little side note: you have room in your thought process on spirituality to think that your self-discipline is a reflection of your spirituality, and a lack of self-discipline is a reflection of lack of spirituality. That's not a comfortable thought in our world, but a spirit of self-discipline, that's in there too. So our spiritual power is meant to accomplish. It's meant to affect change. It's meant to do something. And this verse here really, not this verse here, is one that really sticks with me. It gives me a mental image that I really identify with, and it always has. And this is from Romans. It says, do not offer any part of yourself to sin as an instrument of wickedness, but rather offer yourselves to God as those who have been brought from death to life, and offer every part of yourself to Him as an instrument of righteousness. Like I'm a tool in God's hand that is building the kingdom. That's what God empowers His people for. Yeah, you live on this earth, and yeah, you need to eat. So I'm not saying, hey, you should never have a job. You should never. But I'm saying, if you're not offering yourself as an instrument of righteousness to God, you're missing it. If God isn't actively using you somehow to build His kingdom, He'd like to. And He'll empower you for it. Now, this next one is going to seem weird to you, but bear with me for a few minutes because this makes sense to me, and I'll see if I can make it make sense to you. Okay, I know it's not science class, but the first law of thermodynamics, we'll just hit the highlights here. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. It may change in form and pass from one place to another and act upon matter in various ways. However, no gain or loss of energy occurs. And you can have an exothermic reaction where energy lost from the system goes into the environment outside, or an endothermic where energy from the outside is put in. Okay, well, none of that makes any sense, Gary. It does here, so I don't know. Just think spiritually now, instead of energy. We're talking about spiritual power. Here it says this is basically you can take. It says an example here: wood burning. The potential energy of the molecular bonds in the wood, when you burn it, it becomes kinetic energy. Or you can have thermal. You get heat. You can take the Hoover Dam. We mentioned it before, and dam up all that water, and then let some go through, and you can turn that into energy. But you can't just, here, I need some energy, I'll make it. You can't make it. You have to change it from one form to another. It's already there. And in the process of changing it, none is lost. It just becomes something different. That's the whole principle here. So spiritually now, what's your source of power? We talked about in that last verse, back up, do not offer any part of yourself to sin as an instrument of wickedness, but rather offer yourselves to God as those who have been bought from death. There's two choices in that verse. There's not a third, hey, offer yourself to this person. That, most of us, or most of this world, want to just, let's put this little this is black and white, but let's put this little gray area in between. That's where I'm comfortable. I didn't really choose sin. I just didn't really choose God. We like to have that place, but it doesn't exist. It says, offer yourself to sin as an instrument of wickedness, or offer yourself to God as an instrument of righteousness. There's two sources of spiritual power. We don't make our own. We can't make our own. You can get it one place, you can get it another. That's it. Ultimately, Satan's power, it was granted to him by God, and God will take it away. And why God hasn't already, that's beyond my pay grade, and that's another story for another day. And there's a lot of depth in that water. But right now, he has some spiritual power. And he'll offer it to people. What well are you going to go to? And this is something that we need to grasp, to understand. You cannot possess power. You can't own it. You can't make it. You can't hold it. You can't save it for later. We can't, it's like that's the second law of thermodynamics, but we won't get into that. You can't just store it here. Entropy happens. It goes away. You'll lose it. You go out there right now and you start your car and it starts great. Leave it sit there until 2027 and try that again. It's not going to start. The battery's going to be dead because it can only hold it for so long. It doesn't make power. It only holds the power that was put into it. You put power into it by firing it up and burning gas so that you could turn your alternator and put power in there. If you don't charge it, it will die. Every time somebody looks at you and says, well, I don't really need to go to church to be a Christian. If you don't charge it, it will die. You don't make your own power. You cannot possess it. You can't own it. This is my power. I'm just going to do whatever I want. It's not your power. If you made it, it might be, but it's not. And then secondly, only you can decide how your power is used. Like we said, an instrument of righteousness. What are you going to do with the power that God grants you? Are you going to, stand up there and advance yourself? Or are you going to stand up there and build God's kingdom? So there's one analogy that I want to use here that it kind of makes sense to me, like that last one did, but hopefully it'll make some sense to you. Because I use tools every day, so it just makes sense to me. Daedalus has even got a little drywall mud on it, just saying. There's a battery. This thing holds power. It doesn't make power. If I set this thing on the shelf and come back in 3 years, it's going to be dead too. But I can plug this thing into tools and I can do things, but it only holds so much power. After I do things, I got to plug it in again. And I remember my grandma telling me, you get filled with the Spirit, and then you feel great, and then in a week you just kind of feel downtrodden and stuff. She said that's because we leak. She said we were made that way. We're supposed to leak because all that Spirit that you got in you, it's not just for you; it's for everybody else too. So you're not supposed to fill this thing up and set it on a shelf and save it forever and remember that day because that was awesome. But you're supposed to go out in that world and let it leak. Do something with it. And then you come back here next week and charge it again, so then you can do something with it all over again. So this, without this, is pointless. This is us. This is God right here. If we don't ever put ourselves in here and plug this thing in, you're not going to have any power. So your power is determined by your nearness to this. Because if you get far enough away from it, you're not going to have it anymore. The next thing we talked about was make yourself an instrument of righteousness. This is the best part, is you can take one of these things and you can do all kinds of stuff. I got a Sawzall, I can tear some stuff up. Did I pick that up on a microphone? Is that really annoying? I don't know. Yeah, I could tear stuff down. I can do whatever with that thing. It's a lot of fun. Or I can take that same power and I can plug it in if I do this right. And instead of, maybe I can't do this right, instead of tearing things down, I can light them up. I can be a light. I can take my power and light things up. I can build things instead of destroying them. If you take that battery, you take that power. See, God provides you the place to plug this in, plug yourself in. This is you. You decide what you're going to do with it. You're going to build something with it. You're going to tear something down with it. You're going to hoard it. You're going to share it. God empowers us for a reason. There's a whole world of people out there who need a little of that power. That's what it's for. So I'm just gonna pray quick, and then we're gonna dismiss here online, and then afterwards we'll have a song. So, God, tonight, Lord, I just pray that your Spirit would speak to our hearts. Help us to understand your word, and not just principles and ideas and stuff, God, but your care for us, your love for us, and your love for those around us, God, and help us to feel that enough to act. God, just bless your people in Jesus' name. Amen. So those of you online, we're gonna sign off. So I'm gonna give you the 3, 2, 1 because that's what Pastor Brad always does. 3, 2, 1. Good night. And